Hello, BookShark BootCamp. It is your community manager, Jana, and I am here with a new setting, so I apologize if we have a little bit of a delay. So glad that you could join us today. It's our first live for BootCamp 2024, and if you've been with BootCamp alum, you've been with us for quite a while now, maybe a year or possibly four. We are working on our fourth year of boot camp. And so as we continue to do the things and get better at the things that we do as things become available to us, I thank you for your patience as we are figuring out the changes that all of the platforms tend to make on us. I feel like just like in homeschooling, as soon as you get one thing figured out, then something else kind of changes and you have to go with the flow and find a new groove. So that's what we're doing here today. Welcome. I'll wait a few more seconds for people to join us. I'm so excited to have our guest on today. Her name is Stephanie Cavin. She is a homeschool mom, a second generation homeschool mom like myself. And I don't want that to scare you guys off to think that if you're unfamiliar with homeschool, if this is your first experience, that there's no way you could possibly do it. The only way that we're succeeding is because we've done it ourselves. Let me put that to rest for you. I am still learning every single day. The way I homeschool my children is not the way I was homeschooled at all. If you can imagine in the 90s what that could have looked like. And now what it looks like today is completely different. So we are all on a level playing field here in homeschool in 2024. And so I just want to welcome you guys to our first live. I am going to bring Stephanie on. I am so excited to talk to you guys about how you can continue to work and homeschool your kids. Stephanie is a pro at this, and she's got some great tips for us today. So let me bring her in. Hi, Stephanie.
Yay! Hello! I'm so sorry for the confusion, but I am so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
We are excited to have you. We think that everything is working. I am, again, just trying to figure out, as you know, how all of these things change frequently as soon as we figure them out. But we're here and we are live, and we hope that people can hear us and are going to enjoy what we have. If for any reason our broadcast is not working properly, we are recording it and we will put it obviously not live then. But if you are watching this later and you didn't catch it live, then you don't need to worry regardless. So, Stephanie, thank you so much for being here. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to our bootcamp members?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. It's always such a privilege. BookShark is so near and dear to my heart, and so it's such a privilege to be here. So thank you. My name is Stephanie. I am a second generation homeschooler, just like you said, and we have been homeschooling our own two children for the past 8 years. And I am also a California high school teacher. I've taught elementary, and the last 3 years I've been teaching high school in the classroom. And that is challenging and wonderful. And so I definitely understand the working homeschool world, and just try to encourage moms that need to work and homeschool that you can do it. It just takes a little bit of strategy. So.
Now, you have a whole program that's actually available to people where you will walk them through exactly how they can homeschool. And you give really different scenarios too. So, your personal scenario, much like mine, is I have a full time partner and we work together and we are able to tag team things. But you even have ways that single parents can homeschool.
Yeah, so I think that every situation is so different. We have homeschool moms, we have parents who don't have the support, like you and I have our partners, and so I think that a lot of ways that you can do that is by tapping into co-ops. Co-ops are such a wonderful resource. I know that there are different types of co-ops. We have a 2-day co-op, but there are 5-day co-ops. There are different, so that is something that's really helpful. Asking for help. I know that not everyone has the support, but asking for help. If you teach English and you know someone who is strong in math, asking, hey, can we swap and I'll tutor yours, you tutor mine. And then thinking outside the box a little bit with weekend homeschooling or night homeschooling. I know that sometimes we have to homeschool at night because the day, my husband had to do things. And so we have to homeschool at night. So kind of thinking outside the box of, do we do this on the weekends? Do we do this at night? And then I think eliminating all of the expectations that we kind of have projected from the school of this 6 to 8 hour school day. That's really not, when you homeschool, you can consolidate a lot and really simplify. And I think that that's really helpful when you are a working homeschool parent, is just to bring it back to the basics. What do we absolutely need? Do we need all of these worksheets? Do we need all of these packets? What is absolutely necessary? And I think simplifying can make it a lot more accessible for parents. And so, yeah, I have a lot of friends that some are hairstylists, some work from home, some use grandparents. There's a lot of working homeschool parents. So definitely, if someone is interested in that, there's a lot of us out there. So don't feel isolated or alone.
Yeah, you and I have seen a real shift in homeschool. Obviously, so different when we were homeschooled as kids. We really couldn't go outside. People would question us if we were at the grocery store with our
Yeah.
parents during the middle of the day. I mean, it was kind of crazy. And then it's funny because my kids still get that sometimes. Like, why aren't you in school? It's like, are you kidding me? Like,
Yeah.
isn't half the world homeschooling right now? But I do forget that people are still viewing education in a very traditional sense. And I think that even homeschool parents, we also make that mistake.
Mhm.
We make this big decision that is countercultural, yet we still view it when we get down to it in a very traditional sense. So let's start with the beginning. You touched a little bit on it with time management. Looking at the different ways that you can homeschool. There was actually a question in our boot camp this weekend that there are people who feel like even BookShark is taking too long, which I don't disagree, because we give you so much, right?
Yeah.
And part of homeschooling is deciding what part of what you're given do you want to use when.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about time management and how you guys use BookShark in a 2-hour school day.
Yeah, I love this because I don't know if you're familiar with Jennifer Pepito. She has a podcast with the Peaceful Press. And she was just talking about, what do we want our kids to remember? What do we want them to remember for their environment, for their childhood? When they look back on their childhood, what do we want them to remember? And I think that that really is tied to this, because there is so much of an expectation for us to be in all of the sports, and as homeschoolers, like you said, we have more available to us now than we ever have before. We have sports, we have co-ops, we have music lessons, we have band and choir. We have so much that is available to us, and then let alone the academic work that they have to do. So I think at the beginning of the year, stepping back and saying, what do we want our kids to remember about their childhood? And giving ourselves permission to pare down and just do the basics, especially as working parents. I know that when I pile on the co-ops, when I pile on the co-ops and all of sorry, 1 second. Hey, babe. Yeah, sorry, I'm on a live. Sorry.
Beauty
I didn't
live.
I didn't warn him. Yeah, so I think just giving ourselves permission that it's okay not to sign up for all of the things. It's okay not to do all of the worksheets and all of the packets, but to pare down and say, what does my child need? For us, reading is, we love that about BookShark, is that it is literature based. So a lot of the times we don't do all of the worksheets. There's a few, it's not a lot in BookShark, which is really nice, and that's why we love it. But sometimes we don't always get to the writing portion, like the copy work. So for me, prioritizing the reading has really made a difference in giving us the 2-hour school day. Math is something that we do online, and that's something that has really helped me as a working homeschool parent, because it's all, it tutors them, it corrects it. But I think prioritizing what is absolutely necessary for this day for my child to really succeed, because at the end of the day, I think we can take out the worksheets, we can take out the packets, and we can take out the expectation to do all of the things. And that's how we can bring it into a 2-hour day. Does that make sense?
It does. I think people may be surprised that a math teacher does not teach her own kids math. But that's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking
Yeah.
about finding what works for your family. Now, I think it's important for us to qualify. How old are your children right now?
Yeah, so my daughter just turned 9 and my son is turning 11.
Okay. So, for those of you who are listening who may think, okay, but realistically, high school is going to take more time. Well, it certainly can, again, depending on the trajectory of your student and what your expectation of homeschool is. So, there is ways to prepare your student for college if that is what they want to do. And then, yeah, they'd be doing more book work because they're prepping for that type of collegiate experience. But if your student is going to go off and do more trade school or different things, I am a hairstylist. I went to beauty school after I homeschooled before I went to
Oh,
college.
that's
So
great.
yeah, like there's so many different paths, and I think we have to kind of have an overview maybe of the future, but also not put too much stock into the future. I one of my twins was just bound and determined to get into publishing and editing. And we took her and we toured a school in Nashville. And this felt like a good fit when she was 16. And then guess what? She finished her AA degree and she's not continuing on. And so, I mean, so many things can change, but she's prepped to be able to if she decides she wants to go back. But I do think that the younger years, the reading is obviously in BookShark's mind is the most important, right?
Yeah.
Being read to, studies are
Yeah.
showing that. You can find so many studies now that will
Right.
back this up with scientific
Mhm.
evidence that being read to and reading
Yeah.
are what is really going to give you a solid foundation for education further
Mhm.
on. I remember when my kids were younger and they would complain, as all kids do,
Yeah.
and I would say, you do understand that, like, most adult learning is reading and comprehending.
Yeah.
So I'm really setting you up for success, whatever you decide to do
Yeah.
in the future with your life. So
Yeah.
definitely deciding on what you want it to look like, and
Yeah.
then determining, when you come to the feast, the
Yeah.
banquet of BookShark, you don't have to eat everything. You don't
Yeah.
have to try it all. Like,
Yeah.
I say, especially in the beginning, start small.
Yeah.
Like if you're just getting the read alouds done, if you're just
Yeah.
getting a few questions done, like it's going to take time to really get into a groove no matter what you're using. And
Yeah.
so permission to kind of take it slow, and people are like, oh, well, my weeks won't match up, or
Right.
we get anxious as parents that
Right.
we have to justify our decision to ourselves. We're not
Yeah.
messing up our kids. Like,
Yeah.
newsflash, everybody's messing up their kids. I don't
Yep.
care how you choose to
100%.
educate them,
100%.
right? We are imperfect parents,
Yes.
imperfectly parenting. So
Yeah.
let's just give
Yeah.
permission for people to
Yes.
just, you're gonna mess them up.
Yes.
But when you have a preset curriculum like BookShark,
Right.
you can choose and really decide what works for you and your family. Pare
Right.
it down, beef it
Mhm.
up. I mean, there's so many things. So I think that something that you said in one of your courses, I want to quote it here because I think it is so good. It says, make your schedule flexible enough to adapt, but consistent enough to provide structure. So can
Mm.
you just touch on that really quick for us?
Yeah, I think the beauty of homeschooling is that we are personalizing it for our kids. And I think that that requires a lot of adaptivity and a lot of flexibility. And we're so afraid, just like you said, we're so afraid that we're going to do it wrong or that we're going to ruin our kids, that we're afraid that we're not going to get all the standards or that we're not going to get everything in. But really, homeschooling is about that personalization and about the flexibility to make their academics work for them. And my kids, like I've said, we do the reading in BookShark and we talk about it, but a lot of times we don't do the worksheets. And they test in eighth, and they've actually outscored most of their tests in comprehension and phonics. And that has not been something that I have forced on them. They love to read. And I love that BookShark really cultivates that, because your history, your science, you are getting so much just in the books that are signed. And the kids love it. They love to read. And I think that that's another thing that homeschooling really cultivates is a love for learning. We don't want to suck that out, and we don't want to we don't want to kill kids' love for learning. And I think that through reading, they say that readers are leaders. I truly believe that. I believe that if you are a reader and if you cultivate that in your kids, they're going to walk into this world, into adulthood as leaders. And that's what BookShark really cultivates. And I think that that's what having that flexibility really allows is, we have 5 worksheets, but if you got your reading done, let's talk about it. Maybe we're going to do a narration based, and BookShark does that too, where you're talking about it, and that's comprehension as well. So giving credit to, it doesn't have to look a certain way. It doesn't have to look like the packets. It doesn't have to look like the worksheets. Learning comes in all different forms, and we need to recognize that, and we need to acknowledge how much they actually are learning in their daily lives. So I think that's so beautiful about homeschooling. As homeschoolers, we can just recognize that.
Yeah. I think another thing, just as humans, that we
Mhm.
tend to overestimate things and underestimate. So, perfect example, my college age daughter, that the twin that did decide to finish off her 4 year, she was like, "Oh, I studied all day." I said, "Okay, what does that look like?"
Yeah.
Right? Because you didn't study all day. You didn't do school all day.
Right.
In fact, I saw pictures of you at the river with your friends. You posted.
Oh
So,
no. Yeah.
but I do think that sometimes we don't realize how much time we are or aren't spending on things. And so,
Right.
as part of the time management, I think it's important to take some time and actually time out things so that you get a good understanding that, yeah, it may feel like it took all day, but you may have gotten interrupted with a work thing. Your
Mhm.
child may have gotten off task and you kind of lost them for a while. And
Yeah.
so, I think that part of managing time is knowing where your time is going. And even if that is
Mhm.
taking even just one day and kind of
Mhm.
seeing exactly where things are going. And because we tend to estimate in just the strangest ways sometimes. And I'm guilty of it. I'm squeak by maybe on time because I feel like, oh, I have plenty of time to do this. I can do this. I have this. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think just as humans, we do that. So I think time management on that
Yeah.
is important. And then breaking up into segments is something that you also do in order to get done. So, what does a schedule typically look like for you? Because at this point, for me, my child is doing virtual with BookShark, very independent. She's 15, she's in high school,
Yeah.
but you have more of that average age right now. So, what does it look like?
Yeah, so like I said, my kids are 9 and just turning 11. So I like to get up early before they do so I can kind of just get the day set up. My husband works nights, so he needs a little bit more time. And that's, how we balance. People ask me all the time, who's with your kids? Like, they're not here alone. They're covered. So my husband, we have opposite schedules, which is challenging, but when you're homeschooling, sometimes it takes a little bit of sacrifice, and it's totally worth it for us. So I get the day set up, the kids get up with me, I do breakfast, and then get them going on their reading. Usually I think independence and routine are very important when you are a working parent. I think for anyone, but especially for working parents, because the more independence they have, the more ownership they have of their schooling. So they know where to look for their books. They know exactly where to look in the binders. They do a lot of it themselves. They're looking at the pages. They're pulling their books. I'm not doing that for them because I'm doing 1,000 other things. My husband is sleeping. And so they are doing all of that. So I think when you have that consistency of routine, that's really important for kids. And studies show that time and time again, that kids need that consistency and that routine. So they are pulling their books. I'm getting them ready. They've had their breakfast. And then I head out the door and go to work, and they are doing their reading. So that's when they're finishing their reading. When my husband gets up, that's when they do their math. So we do an online curriculum for math. And again, they're very independent with that. They know how to log on. It tutors them. So every concept is tutored. It's called CTC. That's what we use. But there's Beast Academy. There's several that do that. So that's just something that's been really good for us because it just fosters that independence again. And then they have a co-op. So twice a week we have co-op. for just a few hours a day. And they love that social outlet. For them, it's a really nice place and that's where they get their history and science. So I think that's another thing that we need to remember, is that we don't have to do every subject every day. We do not do every subject every day. They do history and science at co-op twice a week, and then they do math and reading every day, but we don't do history and science every day. We don't do social studies every day. We are blocking out those. So just remembering that we're not in a traditional school system where you have to do every single subject every single day, and giving ourselves permission that, hey, Tuesdays and Thursdays are science and history, and Monday, and we do a 4-day week. So just like BookShark sets up, we love that. The Monday through Thursday, we do English and math. So it's pretty, I think the consistency and the routine, and then that sets your kids up really well for independence. My kids know exactly what they're doing. They wake up, they do it, and 2 hours, they're done, and they have the rest of their day. And I get the question a lot of, well, what do you do with the rest of your day? If you have a 2-hour school day, what are the kids doing? So they do have music practice, and that's not something that I consider a core curricular. So my daughter has an online music, the Hoffman Academy, that she does. My son is learning guitar. They have their chores, so they have to do their chores. They have a chore chart that they have to mark off. They have the co-op, like I said. And so they have a very structured, I as a working parent, we have a calendar that we all refer to, and it's pretty consistent. So the kids know exactly what they're doing. And I'm also not afraid of them being bored. I'm not here to entertain them. And so I think that creativity is cultivated in boredom, and our kids don't need to be entertained every second of the day. So when they have their chores done, their school done, they get free time, and what they do with that free time is up to them. So a lot of times it's out on the trampoline or it's going for a bike ride, but I let them figure out what they're going to do in that free time. And my husband is not entertaining them. I'm at work, and that's a lot of times when they come together and they build a fort or they do something really creative. And there's so much that even they are learning just in that. There's collaboration, there's communication, there's problem solving, so even in those things like building a fort, there's so much happening that is so important for kids that we don't even always give credit to. So
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when we were homeschooling and my brother wanted to ice fish. So I would take my whatever book I was reading at the time, and I would go sit down there while he ice fished, and he like set up the little tent for me, and had the lantern so it kept me warm. I mean, those are like the memories that I have as a kid, because we were able to have so much time and so much flexibility.
yeah.
And there are days, even when my kids were younger, there were days where they vegged out on their time when they were done. And I felt like, everything in moderation, right?
Yeah.
So if
Mhm.
they latched onto a particular series they were really into, they're like, oh, mom, we're gonna get our work done so we can watch another episode.
Yeah.
And I was like, great, fine. And then they would spend, they'd kind of get over that. And then they would spend days working on Legos and creating a world. And I mean, the
Yeah.
stuff that my kids got to do when they were little, that is childhood. That is what childhood is supposed to be
Yeah.
for them.
Mhm.
And like I said, the worrying about the academics, I understand. I get why we worry,
Mhm.
but I do just keep saying, trust the process and
Yeah.
trust people like you and I, who we were there. We
Yeah.
did it.
Yeah.
We
Mhm.
came out, I think, far better than a lot of my peers. I can
Yeah.
say with confidence. I'm sure you
Mhm.
can as well.
Yeah.
And I don't mean better than my peers. I just mean I was set up for success in a
Yeah.
better way than a lot of my peers. And
Mhm.
so, one question that one of the members had, Stephanie, was, you're talking about when you test your kids, they test far beyond where
Yeah.
they should be academically. What type of test are you using to gauge that?
Yeah, so we use iReady testing. We are with a charter, which is another really helpful resource. And so that's something that they implement at the beginning of the year and at the end, but it's available for anyone, iReady testing. My son is also in third grade. The state of California requires CAS state testing because we are registered with a charter school. And so that's something that we also have to do, is the CASP testing now, which he's thrilled about. So I have never really worried about testing. I've never really pushed like, oh, we gotta, in the public school system, a lot of teachers, we have to teach to the test. But in my homeschooling, that's not something that I ever do. I don't worry about the standards. I don't worry about teaching to the test. I don't ever do that. And so I think it really speaks to the fact when my kids are testing eighth grade and surpassing the levels, that you really don't have to have that 6-hour day. You don't have to teach to the test. When kids love learning and they are reading and they are engaging with learning, it really goes far above any forced academics. And I have been the mom that brought home the packets, that did all the worksheets, that had just piles of packets for my kids to do. And I probably did that for 3 years, and it was awful. It was tears from them, tears from me. None of us enjoyed homeschooling. We hated it. And it wasn't until I had to go back to work that I was like, I just can't do this anymore. And I pared everything down. We started BookShark because I was like, well, my kids like to read, so we're going to do this. And it was a complete game changer because the kids were excited about reading. We weren't forcing something on them that they hated. And of course, there's always going to be that day where like, I have to do this, but it wasn't like every single minute just dreading and tears and meltdowns. And that is when they started surpassing the test, because we've always been at the charter. So we've always done iReady testing. And this was not always our story. They were not always doing well in the test. I mean, we would get the phone calls like, hey, math wasn't so great. What are we going to do? And so I've totally been there, like hands up. I have been that parent. But I know that when I simplified it and when I allowed them to love learning, and I didn't put the expectations of what I have to do in a traditional school system on my kids at 6 to 8 hour packets, worksheets, they loved learning, and all of their test scores just like soared. So it just speaks to the simplicity of allowing them to love learning. And yeah, so we use iReady, and then the state testing with CASP testing is what we use.
And I will answer. I know when we were living in Colorado and through our school district, they required a standardized test. Same thing, third grade. And on the odd years, we use the Iowa, I believe, state
Okay.
test. So that was acceptable in Colorado. They didn't have their own. We borrow from other states apparently, but
Okay.
it's the same thing. We,
Okay.
you could do it at a location. You could do it you could proctor it yourself if you needed to.
Mhm.
So there definitely, I would encourage our listeners to find out what their states require,
Yeah.
or if it's just something that you're interested in and don't
Right.
necessarily turn it into anybody, just Google. You will definitely find what you're looking for in order to kind of see if they are on grade level for
Mhm.
nationwide. I would suspect that as you get into homeschooling using BookShark, they definitely will start to surpass. One of the benefits of testing is knowing actually that my youngest was struggling some with math. And
Mm.
so we saw that through the test, even
Yeah.
though I kind of had an idea, we saw that then through the test. And it wasn't that she was below, it's just that she wasn't as high as everything else. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, well, maybe we need to work on that. And so we were able to make some changes from that, which I thought so
Yeah.
that can be helpful as well,
Right.
to have those kind of measuring tools. Not that you, like you said, you're not teaching towards that,
Mhm.
but that you are using that as a guide or a gauge, which I think is wonderful. I think another thing that we're talking about time management, flexibility. How do we get this all done? I know when my kids were younger and that we were doing that read alouds, we did that at night as a family, as our family time, and so. Yeah, were there times that I just wanted to turn on the TV and not do that?
Yeah.
Absolutely, there were.
Yeah.
But when we dedicated that 30 minutes, which is about the time, that was about as much time as I could do. If it was
Yeah.
going to take me any longer,
Yeah.
that again, that's the beauty. You set your timer. When you're done, and you just pick up the
Mhm.
next day
Yeah.
and you can stretch it out over the weekend or whatever you need to do.
Yeah.
But replacing a different activity with something that we could do as a family, it didn't feel it didn't feel like labor. It
Yeah.
felt like, oh my gosh. I remember when we first started, they were like, don't stop reading, keep reading. This is so good.
Yes. I
So
love that.
I don't know why at some point in my life, and maybe I'm one of the few, that I stopped reading to my kids once they could read. I
Mm.
just thought, oh, well, you guys can read. Everybody's reading. This is great. But again, the beauty of reading aloud, the families coming together, the siblings having the ability to talk about what's going on with each other,
Yeah.
them reenacting the things because they get excited about it.
Yeah.
finishing up the book and then watching the movie, or let's be
Yeah.
honest, sometimes replacing the book with the movie. All of those
Yeah.
things are totally fine. But
Yes.
I think that you and I are, just examples of how you can
Hmm.
continue to work and homeschool.
Yeah.
And, even if you're not working, really, really understand that this precious time does not need to be wasted with things that aren't working for you.
Right.
So scale
Hmm.
it back, add things in as you start to get into your groove, and it feels better when you need to. There's so many ways that even though it's written out in a prescribed way, it's just a guide. And I want to just keep reiterating that for people so they don't feel boxed in, because the
Yes.
whole point of homeschooling is to enjoy with your children and
Hmm.
enjoy what you're doing. So before we wrap up, Stephanie, is there anything else, your words of wisdom you'd like to share with our listeners here at BookShark?
Well, I just want to, just what you just said. I love that you said that, because I think so often we feel like failures when something doesn't work. And I was, I had worksheets and packets, and I was doing things that weren't working for my family. And you're not a failure when you try something and it doesn't work. You've succeeded in understanding what doesn't work. And sometimes, in order to find out what doesn't work, we have to try things. And so I just want you to know that if you've tried something and you're like, oh, this isn't working, it did not work, like I'm just a complete failure. No, you have succeeded in finding out what didn't work. Now you can go on to the next thing and see if that works, because it's like relationships. Like, you have to find out what doesn't work sometimes in order to find the one that does work. So in your homeschooling, just give yourself permission to try different things, try different schedules. If, I know some families who do afternoon schooling because mornings is just not for them, or some families who do weekend schooling because they're so busy during the week. So give yourself permission to try different things. And if they don't work, go on to the next one. That's okay. You are finding out what works for you. And every year we sit down and we make a list of, okay, what worked for us this year and what are we going to change next year? What was something that frustrated you? What was something that you felt like didn't work or bring peace to your heart? So I think it's okay to sit down and see what worked and then reevaluate on the things that don't work. Give yourself permission and grace, because we are all figuring this out. It looks great online. It looks amazing on Pinterest and Instagram, and it looks like everyone's just doing it perfectly. But I guarantee you, we are all figuring this out. And every year is a brand new, fresh slate, and we are just doing our best. And we all have the days where we're like, oh my gosh, I just failed. And so don't feel like you're failing in any way, because all of us moms have been there, and we will have more days like that, but we're doing our best. And we are cultivating connection and a love for learning for our kids. And I think that's the beauty, is at the end of the day, we get to cultivate that connection that we don't necessarily get to have in a different setting if we weren't homeschooling. And we get to give them a love for learning, because we're not giving them a rushed childhood. So give yourself grace, because you're doing your best, and that's all your kids need.
That's right. Well, thank you so much, Stephanie. For those who want to connect with you, find out more about what you offer homeschooling parents, the course you have for working homeschooling parents, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, so I am on Instagram mostly, that Cal Teacher Life, where I talk about scheduling and how I do homeschooling as a working parent. So that's typically where I am. You can also email me at stephanie@homeschoolersconnect.com. And yeah, Instagram is probably mainly where I am. I'm also on Facebook, but I'm not there too often. So hit me up on Instagram.
All right, you guys, I will make sure that goes into our notes. Stephanie, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. Hang out for just a second. I'm going to close this out with my viewers. All right, you guys, that's it for September's live. I hope that you really took to heart some of the things that Stephanie and I shared with you today. It's so important for us to be able to support you in what you need, and for us to be able to guide you in this journey, whether you're new to homeschool, whether you've been doing it one way for years and you're looking for a different way of homeschooling. That is the purpose of BookShark's BootCamp. It's the purpose of our podcast, our lives, everything that we do. We want to come alongside and partner with you and walk this journey to to set you up for success. So I want to thank you guys for being here, and I will see you guys on our next live in October. If you're on the boot camp, be looking for me to be on our Real Life and Homeschool, where I come on and just give you a few words of wisdom each week. All right, you guys have a great Monday, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.